For 3 decades, Johnny Carson was more than just a television host. He was a nightly ritual, a trusted presence in American living rooms, and the undisputed gatekeeper of late-night television. To millions of viewers, Carson appeared relaxed, witty, and effortlessly in control. But behind that calm exterior was a man who ran his show with precision, discipline, and an unspoken code that every guest was expected to follow. The rules were simple, though rarely stated aloud. Be charming, be entertaining, and above all, never forget whose show this was. Most celebrities understood that balance. They came prepared, played along, and left the couch having enhanced their public image. But every so often, a guest misjudged the moment, sometimes deliberately, sometimes recklessly, and sometimes because they simply weren't in control of themselves. When that happened, the carefully polished machinery of late-night television creaked, strained, and occasionally broke in front of a national audience. These weren't rehearsed moments. They weren't publicity stunts designed for headlines. They were raw, uncomfortable, and unforgettable cracks in one of television's most controlled environments. What makes these incidents endure isn't just the shock of watching famous people unravel on live television. It's the way Carson responded, the Titan smile, the subtle glances toward Ed McMahon, the split-second decisions made to protect the show, the audience, and sometimes even the guests themselves. These moments reveal not just celebrity meltdowns, but the immense skill required to keep chaos from fully taking over. These are the 7 guests who didn't merely test Johnny Carson's patience. They shattered the illusion of control and left behind some of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night history. 1. Madonna, when provocation replaced conversation. By 1987, Madonna was already becoming a cultural force, though she had not yet reached the untouchable status she would later enjoy. She was controversial, fearless, and increasingly intentional about using shock as a weapon. When she appeared on The Tonight Show, expectations were clear. The producers anticipated playful banter, flirtation within limits, and a polished promotional appearance. What they got was something else entirely. Madonna walked onto the stage dressed in an outfit that immediately disrupted the room's energy. It wasn't just revealing, it was confrontational. She wasn't there to adapt to the show's tone. She intended to bend the show around herself. From the moment she sat down, the interview stopped feeling like a conversation and started feeling like a challenge. Instead of responding to Carson's carefully phrased questions with wit or humor, Madonna escalated. She flirted aggressively. She made explicit remarks. She pushed religious and sexual boundaries that network television in the 1980s still treated as untouchable territory. Each time Carson attempted to steer things back toward safety, she pushed harder. For the first time in a long while, Johnny Carson wasn't leading the rhythm of his own show. He was reacting. His laughter remained, but it was thinner. His redirections became more obvious. Viewers could sense the tension growing, even if they couldn't quite articulate why. The audience response split sharply. Younger viewers saw rebellion and boldness. Older viewers saw disrespect and discomfort. What everyone recognized was that something unusual was happening. Behind the scenes, Carson was not amused. He wasn't furious, but he was deeply annoyed. The segment had been hijacked, and not in a way that served the show. Madonna had gotten exactly what she wanted: attention, controversy, and a moment that would be talked about long after the episode aired. But there was a cost. Despite her growing fame, Madonna was never invited back. In a world where few guests were permanently excluded, her absence spoke volumes. She hadn't failed to entertain. She had failed to respect the balance Carson demanded. 2. Don Rickles, when friendship crossed the line. Don Rickles was not just a guest on The Tonight Show. He was family. His insults were legendary, his relationship with Carson deeply personal, and his appearances among the most beloved in the show's history. Audiences expected chaos when Rickles appeared, but it was always controlled chaos, framed by mutual trust. Until one night, it wasn't. The trouble began off-camera, during a casual moment that seemed harmless at the time. Rickles sat in Carson's chair and accidentally broke a treasured cigarette box that had sat on Carson's desk for years. Carson mentioned it playfully on air the following night, turning it into a joke. Rickles, however, decided to respond in a way no one expected. Without invitation, without warning, and without permission, Rickles burst onto the set in full costume from his sitcom. At first, the audience loved it. The surprise was funny, the energy electric, but as minutes passed, the tone shifted. Rickles didn't just interrupt. He dominated. He grabbed the desk. He shouted. He overwhelmed the structure of the show. Carson laughed, but his eyes betrayed something else. This wasn't planned. This wasn't playful. This was a complete loss of control. For one of the only times in his career, Johnny Carson was not steering the moment. He was surviving it. Backstage, the reaction was swift and serious. Carson was angry, not publicly but deeply. Rickles hadn't just broken a prop or interrupted a segment. He had violated the foundational trust that allowed their dynamic to work. Though their friendship survived, something shifted. The warmth cooled. The appearances became less frequent. The incident stood as proof that even the closest relationships had limits, and that on live television, crossing them carried consequences. 3. Oliver Reed. When intoxication took the wheel, Oliver Reed arrived with a reputation that preceded him. He was brilliant, unpredictable, and infamous for his relationship with alcohol. But even with that reputation, nothing prepared the Tonight Show staff for what unfolded. From the moment he walked onto the stage, it was clear something was wrong. His movements were unsteady. His speech slurred. The smell of alcohol lingered unmistakably. Carson recognized the danger instantly. Still, he tried. Carson asked straightforward questions. Reed gave rambling, incoherent answers. Carson attempted redirection. Reed interrupted. One moment Reed was charming, the next hostile. The audience laughed nervously at first, unsure whether this was part of the act. Soon, it was impossible to ignore. This wasn't eccentricity. This was a man unraveling on live television. Carson faced an impossible decision. Let the segment continue and risk complete collapse, or end it and publicly acknowledge failure. For a host who prided himself on never embarrassing guests, cutting the segment short was a last resort. He did it anyway. The silence afterward was heavy. The incident became infamous overnight. For Reed, the damage was lasting. Hollywood had seen the risk play out in real time, and opportunities vanished. For Carson, it was a stark reminder that even his professionalism couldn't always save a guest from themselves. For Truman Capote, genius lost in real time. Truman Capote was not just another guest. He was a literary icon. Carson admired him deeply and hoped the appearance would showcase his brilliance. Instead, viewers watched something heartbreaking. Capote appeared disoriented from the start. His thoughts wandered. His speech slurred. His focus evaporated. Carson tried repeatedly to guide him toward safer, structured conversation, but Capote resisted, drifting into strange, provocative tangents. The audience waited for flashes of the man they knew. Occasionally they appeared, a clever phrase, a moment of insight, but they vanished as quickly as they came. This wasn't scandalous in the way other meltdowns were. It was sad. Carson's patience was extraordinary. He extended the segment far longer than he would have with most guests, hoping Capote would find his footing. He never did. Capote was never invited back. The appearance marked a public turning point in his decline. For viewers, it was an uncomfortable reminder that genius does not protect against personal demons. For Carson, it was a quiet tragedy played out under studio lights. 5. Shelley Winters. When energy became an explosion. Shelley Winters was a force of nature. Loud, emotional, and impossible to ignore, she brought intensity to every appearance. Usually, that intensity translated into memorable television. This time, it became uncontrollable. What began as lively banter escalated rapidly when Winters perceived a slight from another guest. Her reaction was immediate and explosive. She stood, shouted, and unleashed years of frustration in a torrent of accusations and grievances. The audience fell silent. Carson tried humor, then redirection, then patience. Nothing worked. His irritation became visible, a rarity for a man known for composure. Finally, he exercised the ultimate authority, a sudden commercial break. The segment never fully recovered. Behind the scenes, Carson cooled off, but the message was clear. Winters would still be invited back, but at a distance. She was unpredictable, and unpredictability had limits. 6. Buddy Hackett. When comedy turned confessional. Buddy Hackett was one of Carson's safest bets. A master storyteller, he rarely missed. Until the night, he did. Instead of humor, Hackett arrived with bitterness. His stories turned into grievances. Names were named. Accusations aired. The laughter stopped. Carson attempted to intervene, but Hackett was locked into something deeper than comedy. The segment felt less like entertainment and more like therapy conducted in public. Eventually, Carson cut it short. There was no anger backstage, only concern. Hackett returned later in better form. But the incident lingered as a reminder that even trusted guests could falter when personal struggles surfaced. 7. Red Foxx, the exit that shocked everyone. Red Fox's appearance lasted less than 2 minutes, yet it became legendary. When told he couldn't smoke on set, Foxx didn't argue. He didn't joke. He stood up and walked off. The speed of it stunned everyone. Carson recovered instantly on air, but backstage, the shock was real. The incident wasn't dramatic because of conflict. It was dramatic because of its suddenness. Foxx eventually returned, but the ease was gone. A boundary had been crossed in the most public way possible. These moments endure because they were rare. Johnny Carson built a career on consistency, comfort, and control. The Tonight Show was not a place for meltdowns. That's precisely why the few that occurred remain etched in television history. Carson wasn't chasing viral moments. He wasn't exploiting discomfort. His instinct was always to protect the audience, the guest, and the integrity of the show. And when that balance broke, America watched, not because it was planned, but because it was real.